G'day, mate. What's your name?
Hello, mate. For tax purposes, Pete Berner.
Pete Berner. And what do you do, Pete?
Me, I'm. That's a good question, and I don't know how to answer it. I'm an artist across many. I can't. I haven't got just one thing, and I've never had just one thing, and I can't fill out forms. There's never enough room. They always expect you to make, like, I'm a company director, or you're a writer, or you're a performer. I'm not. I'm a performer. I'm an artist. I'm a whole lot of anything, basically.
Everything.
Yeah. So, what do I do? I am a provider of human content.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Crowdworkcast. Yes, after 5 short years, Season 2 is finally here, and we're kicking off in style with today's guest, Peter Berner. Now, Pete is a comedian I absolutely love working with. You'll have probably heard of him. He was on radio for many years. He's been on television for many years. He's an absolute champion and an amazing stand-up comedian. And I thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation, as I do all my conversations with Pete. So if you like today's episode, please do like, subscribe, leave a rating wherever you're listening to this. If you're watching it on YouTube, please hit subscribe. My channel is Andrew Barnett Comedy on YouTube. That really helps the show. Now, if you'd like to follow Pete. Pete is Bernerland on Instagram, which is BERNERLAND on Instagram, or he is Peter_Berner on Twitter, or you can go to his website, peterberner.com, to find out everything he's up to. As for me, if you're in Canberra and you'd like to see me live, I will be at the Canberra Comedy Club at Transit Bar on November 9. That's a Wednesday. You can go to Canberra Comedy for all the details on Facebook. They'll have ticketing info and that sort of stuff there. That's going to be a fun show. If you're in or around Sydney, you can catch me most Monday nights at a little room I run with a comedian by the name of Tom Orr. It's called Comedy Downstairs. It's at the Wildfire Lounge in Glebe. It's usually us running some new stuff. A bunch of great comedians swing by. It's a fun Monday night, so please do come down and check that out. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, I am at Andrew Barnett Comedy. The same on Facebook. Andrew Barnett Comedy is my Facebook page. So get in touch, reach out, tell me what you think of the show on both those channels, or hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Mr. A. Barnett. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to crack on with the show. Here's my lovely chat with Peter Berner. A provider of human content. That is probably the most noble way I've heard anything like that expressed.
Wanky would be another way of saying it.
Mate, I'm looking at wellness bloggers are going to be I give human content.
I give human content. Oh yeah, I that's what I do, I guess, and I'm not very good at it. I'm okay, but I'm not very good at promoting the fact that I'm a human content provider.
Yes, you're under the radar human content.
Very
provider.
under the radar human content provider.
Let's Now, I'm really interested because you and I met through stand-up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this. You were actually the headliner at my very first paid gig.
Really?
Yeah, back in, it would have been 2010, and Comedy on Edge were running downstairs. And
wow, yeah, okay.
They slipped me $50 to do 5 minutes worth of material on their little showcase night. You were the headliner, and Chris Wainhouse was the special guest.
Right.
And I remember vividly sitting as a very fresh-faced new comic, sitting backstage listening to you and him talk. And it was one of those ones where I was only thinking about this today, where now I'd probably join in the conversation,
yeah.
But I had nothing to contribute at that stage.
Right.
And I had the good sense, I think, to know I had nothing to contribute.
You know what? That's exactly when I started in stand-up in, I want to say 1988.
Oh, wow.
It was either 88 or 89. I think it was 88. At the original Comedy Store, when it was down at the Quay in Margaret Lane, there was the stage, and then there was a room divider, a sort of a floating. It wasn't a floating wall, but and then behind that there was a space in the bar, right? And all the comics would sit around at a round table, and at that stage it was guys like Graham Pugh, George Smelovich, Vince Sorrenti, Anthony Aykroyd. Adrian Norman, who was the regular host down there, and I, being a sort of, I was that little, the little dog in the cartoon.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? You sort of sit back and it was only one day Graham Pugh, it would have been after 6 months or something. Graham Pugh shifted in the seat and said, "Come and sit." And it was like that was my moment where I thought, "Oh man, I've been accepted at the round table." It's quite a moment. And you're right, you do as a newbie, you don't want to pipe up because you're going to look like a cock.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and I was listening to you guys because you were talking about different gig stories. You were talking about people. You both obviously had been around a long time.
Yeah. Was any of it libelous? None of it was libelous.
No. It was interesting though. It was really interesting. And I just remember that was watching Chris close the first half, and it was like, you think your 5 minutes went well.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, that was great.
Yeah.
And then you watch a bloke take it apart, and I was like, well, how's it getting better? And then you went and just took it to another level.
Really?
It was
good.
It was, it was a big learning experience, and it was good. I'm so glad now that we've worked together many times since that I didn't pipe up and make an idiot of myself that first time.
I'd like to think that I don't think we don't think we'd have dismissed you outright.
No.
I know what you mean, though. I do know what you mean. Oh, I appreciate that. It's nice to know that it went well. That's good.
That was a fantastic night. I actually thought of framing my little $50 note, but turns out I wasn't rich enough.
No,
I needed the 50.
I needed it. $20 was the first amount I ever got paid. $20 to Peter Fox, who was a comic at the time, had a gig upstairs. It was a private gig upstairs at the London Hotel in Balmain.
Oh wow!
And this would have been again a couple of months after I started, and he said, "Come along and support me." And he gave me $20 out of his. He must have got a couple of $100 fee or something. So he paid me my first $20.
So, and the other thing you're telling me is the rates haven't gone up a lot since
and they have not. I was thinking about that today. I went in. I looked at what was over the road at the pub. Garlic bread's now $10.
Yeah.
Comics are still getting paid the same rate when garlic bread was like $3.
Yeah.
And it's if I was going to shake my fist and complain about one thing, it's the fact that, and it's comics' fault, I think, because we are so scared of never working that we'll take the gig.
Yeah.
So you don't sort of go, "No, mate, my fee is $5,000, or I don't turn up." Well, then guess what, mate? You're not turning up.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of confidence, and I think I don't know, I think maybe the model's a bit different for guys, a lot of new guys starting now, in that they just go, well, okay, it's not about doing those making a living doing clubs, doing headlining, a comedy night at a club or whatever. It's about getting your own profile to the point where you can sell a large number of tickets. And,
Agreed.
Just do your own tour.
All of those, what do they call them? Streams that people have now in order to get their product out there, their work out there. When I was starting, you lived and died on the set that you did in the room. It didn't exist beyond the room. Now the set, in fact, the room is almost just the recording vessel to get it out there on your social medias and everything else's, and that's where your big audience comes from.
Well, it's interesting. I've noticed that change. I've had a few conversations with comics who are like not new, but newer than I am, and certainly far newer than you are. But,
oh man!
And they talk about their aim now is often that it's okay. If I'm in a room and it's about the clips, you got to get the clips. So they go, I do a bit of gold that I'm not going to put online. That's for me. And then I go to the crowd and I do this crowd work. But now you watch, and there's some people that are really good at it, but there's a lot of garbage crowd work.
There's a lot of garbage, and it's not. It's funny, It has changed a little bit. It's got soft and flabby, I think, a little bit. I think it was when Rodney ran the comedy store. It was
Rodney Rood.
Yeah, Rodney Rood. He was brutal to, if you weren't working, he made you the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
As the MC. But you had to get sharper and it's not, you couldn't just get up there with a lazy, rambling, pointless chat that is, at best, mildly amusing cocktail conversation, but it ain't stand up. It ain't. You're supposed to get up there and provide something to the audience, not not do what radio does now, which is give us a ring, tell us about your stuff, and we'll just laugh along. Like, we're supposed to provide you with the entertainment, not you provide us. So it's just got to get tighter, I think. I think there's a lot of people going, oh, I sound like an old man, but a grunchy old man. But I think it's getting a bit flabby.
Yeah, look, to be honest, and this is actually something too I'm becoming more aware of, because I've started to notice, sort of going through material and just having that jerrying that the 19 and 20-year-olds aren't seeing me as of their generation. They're seeing me as of their parents' generation, which is sort of it's an adjustment to make for me now in how I deliver my material, because you've got to be aware of, I think being aware of how you're perceived on stage is super hard, which is one of the things I love that you do, is when you talk about some stuff, you go, I'm an old man, I'm supposed to be crazy. You're going to hear my thoughts. We're leaning into that idea.
I think so. I can't pretend that I'm not. I don't. And I've realised. I'm older than. When you got a 20-year-old in the room, I could almost be their grandfather.
Yeah.
I'm not quite, but I'm getting up to that end of the scale.
Which is one of the things I do love about stand-up, though, is you do get that interaction with, and you've got to work out how to get ideas across to a bunch of different generations.
I like the fact comedy, as is the audience, so should the performers be generational.
Yeah,
I like the idea that you've got, and I'm not. I think if you're a young comic, you're allowed not to be great. I mean, when you first start out, you don't, and you must.
You have to not be great.
You have to not be great. And you have to not be afraid to not be great. And I think that's really important. Don't assume straight away that you have to all of a sudden be Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle. They're 35 years to get to that point.
One of the things I did a gig recently with a bunch of guys. Basically, I was hosting and Gary Eck was headlining, but then it was a lot of guys who were very new, like 2 and 3 years in. Yeah. And some even less than that. And one of the things I noticed is it's gone back much more gaggy.
Yeah, right.
There's a couple of acts I watched, and I'm like, oh, you got into this because your entry into stand-up was watching clips on TikTok where everything's punchy. It's less than 90 seconds. And so they'd sort of written their joke in little 90-second chunks, and it was sharper than I remember. My approach when I started, which is I kind of like how it changes and evolves, and it does. I don't know about you, but that reinvigorates me in terms of, okay, this is what we're doing now. Okay, I've got to find out a way to get my stuff over to audiences who expect it in a slightly different way. Oh,
absolutely. And me as a stand-up now is, if I'm allowed to say, is that I'm a better stand-up now than I was 30 years ago. I mean, I should be, but
yeah.
But even 20 years ago, my writing, such as it is, my joke. My ability to have the phrase, the thought, is sharper now than it was.
You have a remarkable ability, and which is one of the things, because I don't know if you realise that you are quite well admired on the Sydney scene.
I always assumed that nobody knew the hell who I was.
No. Your stand up is, and particularly the people that work with you multiple times, they're like, I just. It's so sharp. But one of the things I've always loved about you is your ability, and Tommy Dean has a similar thing, your ability to synthesize a thought in joke form so quickly. I remember we did a gig at Crow's Nest Hotel. This would have been maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I was hosting, and I was about to bring you on, and you were staring up watching the wrestling on the TV. They had some WWE style wrestling. And I'd see you watch. I clocked you as I'm doing my, getting them settled, getting them doing a little bit of material off the top.
Don't you love the way at a comedy venue there's wrestling on the TV?
Yeah, and you're just standing at the back of the room, just staring up, and I'm like, he's not listening to me at all. He doesn't, he's relaxed. And then you went up, and I could see the cogs turning in your brain. You were thinking about something, and I brought you on, and your first 5 minutes was all stuff about what you'd just watched, and it was amazing.
Oh,
was.
That's good. I can write that down.
But such that it is. But I don't know about you, but sometimes you get that pure.
Absolutely, you must, and I think that's really, for me, that keeps me interested. If I can do something that I've never heard before, that's exciting, because I know that I've got my bucket of bits,
Yeah.
my Lego that I carry around. But if I can throw some new bricks in there each night, and what happens is, I think any performer, you become enamored with your new idea,
Yes.
and then that becomes the thing you can't wait to do again. And then you realise there's other stuff that you've forgotten about, and there's stuff that I haven't done for years, but it's still a good joke. It's still good material. And because of the way I've realised that when I see the news talk about something, you go, yeah, man, I did the joke on that 25. It's like you realise it hasn't moved one. The issue has not moved one dot.
And it
from
cycles
when I first
round.
did that joke, and then it cycles back around again. Yeah. We're outraged by aged care, mate. We were outraged by 1996. I did that joke.
And you can almost the best example of it is every 4 years you see people roll out their Olympics bit, and that'll run for a bit, and then boom, just goes back on the shelf.
Back on the shelf. Put it in that pocket there. Absolutely. Yeah. And you not that you want to sit at home and wish for natural disasters or serial killers to drag out your serial killer bit, but it helps.
Next pandemic, I'm locked and loaded.
You're loaded for that. You can't wait.
One of the things I was thinking about when I asked you to come on is I don't really know how you started. How did you get into comedy? Like, so you leave high school. Was comedy the goal? What was the goal? Well, obviously you didn't have much of a goal because you still can't sum up what you do.
No, I can't sum up what I did. No. To be honest, it was a bungee jump moment. It was I blah blah blah, and then I went overseas and backpacked around and worked in pubs and like that. Came back, got back into the job I was in. Blah blah blah, and then one Monday it was. I went to the movies and Punchline, Tom Hanks movie Punchline.
Yep. Is that the one where there's lockers in the green room?
Yeah.
All comedy rooms.
All like all comedy rooms. And it had a green room, And I remember going to that. And I'd been to the Comedy Store a few times in the 80s, when I was just a punter and watching and it made me laugh and I enjoyed it. And I was I'm more fascinated by the people backstage. I'm more fascinated by that world, that secret world that the audience don't get to go to behind the curtain. And so I came out of that movie and I thought, I'm going to have a crack at that. That'd be fun. I literally, walking back to the train station, I think it was, or the ferry or whatever it was, I got on the phone to the Comedy Store and said, when's open mic night? And they said, it's tomorrow night. I said, can I put my name down? And they went, yeah, come down. That was it.
Wow.
So it was a week later, the following Tuesday or something, and then I had no material. It wasn't, again, it's like bungee jumping. You don't go to a bungee jump having done lots of preparation for bungee jumping. You just turn up and do it. So I figured I'd just turn up and do it. And so Salman Rushdie had just brought out, or the Satanic Verses was big news, and the comics performer, I can't remember who they were now. It was open mic, literally.
All fatwa material?
It was all Salman Rushdie jokes, and I got up and I remember the first thing out of my mouth was, oh, look, I promise I won't do any Salman Rushdie material. Hooray! They love me. And I can't remember what I did, but I remember my leg was shaking, the bead of sweat was coming down here. It was, but I got laughs. And then I remember that I went to the bar at the back of the Comedy Store and was having a beer, and I felt like bungee jumped,
Yeah.
And
That adrenaline rush.
Yeah, adrenaline rush. And Adrian Norman, who was the MC, came up and said, that was all right. You got laughs. I said, yeah, it was funny. He said, you should come back. And I said, really? He said, yeah, come back. And I literally went out and did what you're supposed to do as a comic. I bought myself a hot dog at 11 o'clock and, as if pretending I'm a New York comic, And then that became my home. Because it was open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. 5 nights a week I would go there every night. It was my social life. It was my home. And I started at the same time. Around the same time I started, Akmal started, James O'Loughlin started, Jim Owen came along a little bit later on. Not much later, a few months afterwards, he turned up at the Comedy Store. And then, the rest is history.
Yeah.
And a whole lot of others. Anthony Mers turned up, and Mark My Words had turned up, and Gary was around. Gary Eck turned up, and all these guys. That's the alumni of that
generation.
But I literally lived
crop.
there. It was a great crop, and we had some great, and we used to watch. I used to watch them all. I wouldn't leave till the feature finished. you know, because you watched great stagecraft. People like Rick Carter, whose stagecraft, he was just his presence was phenomenal. His material was cobbled together from, you know, Pryor and everybody else, plus a bit of his own stuff thrown in. But his stagecraft, Pewey, Aykroyd, Ross Daniels, Vince. But you'd watch these guys to see how they worked the room, you know, and you learnt by watching. And then stop me when I get boring, but I remember it was about 6 months in when I got invited down to do a unpaid spot on a Friday night, the big, you know, the major, and that's you're walking out to the Comedy Store crowd, and it's an addiction, you know. And then my whole life became comedy, and I ended up going down to the Harold Park. I discovered the Harold Park and fell in love with the Harold Park and Simon Morgan and Mark Morgan, who ran it, and I lived upstairs for a while. It was there all the time. So and then about a year later, I gave up real work in 1989.
What was real work?
I was a production manager at an ad agency. And again, I had no burning desire to be a production manager at an ad agency. I left school in 80, did a year at uni, dropped out.
Which uni?
Sydney, science, because I had to do something.
Yeah.
That's why, you know, people say, what do you want to do? And you go, oh, wait, why does he doesn't need to know. Every parent, I mean, you'd think, oh, well, please have an idea of what you want to do, but you don't need to. Then sitting around in the summer of 1981, Mum and Dad got the shits because I was sitting at home. VHS had just arrived, so a mate of mine and I spent the summer renting videos and going back and watching videos. Dad said, get a job, so ended up as a copy boy at the Daily Mirror for 3 months. Then got a job as a dispatch boy in an ad agency. That got bought. I was retrenched. I became a cadet auctioneer for a year. Came back to advertising.
A cadet auctioneer?
Yeah.
That was a thing?
Yeah. I went up and lived in Newcastle. I was 19. I turned up in Newcastle. I was going through my mod phase. So I had stovepipes, winkle pickers, you know, smoked Kent cigarettes.
So this is mid-80s?
No, this is 82.
So
83.
Early 80s, peak Newcastle. This is pre-Tap Dogs, Newcastle.
Yeah. This is Newcastle.
Yeah,
the Workers' Club is still standing, hadn't been knocked over yet.
Yeah.
So I've literally turned up in winkle pickers and to a wool shed where everyone's wearing moleskins and riding boots. And within a week, I was down at the shop buying moleskins and riding boots. The winkle pickers were parked. And I spent a year there, and I still know Pat Slattery, who was my boss then, is one of the great humans, and a great impact on my life. I was there for a year, and then I sort of came back to Sydney. I missed Sydney a bit, and I came back to Sydney and got back into advertising, and then went overseas and came back, and that's when you pick up the story of, I was at home realising I don't play tennis. I'm not a member I'm not a part of the sailing club. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not a bird watcher. So what do I do in the evenings instead of sitting at home watching Knight Rider or whatever the fuck was on telly?
It's a fun aspect of comedy is that it does provide a social life as well, because I started a bit late. I felt like at the time I started real late. I think I was 27.
I was 20. I was 26.
Yeah, I felt like an old man, like starting way too late. But I wouldn't have had anything to say.
When you hear that,
either.
Seinfeld started at 15 and Chris Rock was doing it at 15. You know, I'm not that. I didn't have a burning desire to be a stand-up either. It was accidental. I fell into it, and you're right. There's a massive social life attached to it, and that's what I really enjoyed the most. I had a great, and we were all in it together, and you'd see them. You'd be every night of the week.
Yeah,
same faces, and you know. I remember the day that your name goes up in chalk on the Comedy Store board, and you think, "Oh, I've made it." And I haven't looked back. I mean, as you get older and you different opportunities present, the people that you started with, I don't see them anymore because I've never been to anyone's house. Pretty much, we met at clubs.
That makes perfect
We don't.
sense.
I mean, the only person's house I've ever went to was Tommy's. We used to hang out at Tommy's house when he was in Enmore, married to Beth, in the early days, and then I've been to Tommy's house now. But I don't go to comics houses. We meet at clubs and bars.
You'd barely work with Tommy these days as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is as your career goes off, it gets diverges. Yeah, you see Tommy Because we're both at that level where we're both headlining, so you don't have
Yeah.
two headliners on the one bill. So I'm working here and he's working over there. Yeah, we don't see each other.
You might occasionally get on one of those bills where the promoters decided they really want this room to be a monthly thing or
Yeah.
a weekly thing, and they're stacking the first.
Yeah,
few
that's right. I see him occasionally.
lineups.
Like I think I'm doing something with him in a month or so, but yeah, rare. Whereas once upon a time it was every night of the week, and then you'd end up at Fatima's having, when the Comedy Store was moved to Cleveland Street, you'd end up eating falafels at one. It's a great life. I mean, it's a performer's life. It's poorly paid. It's fucking great when it works.
Yeah.
It's even more fun in its torture when it doesn't.
Well, that's what makes the victories so sweet.
Yeah, and those comics, when they get together, they don't talk about the times they killed. They talk about the times they died. Because it's more. It's no one says, "Oh, I killed at the Opera House in 10th." No, I was at the Guildford Hotel in Guildford, and there were 4 people, and they hated me, and I was.
That's the thing, because that's not the killing at the Opera House isn't the interesting story.
No.
Who cares about that? Because that's essentially what you're supposed to do.
That's the icing, man. I want to talk about the cake.
It's like a builder coming home from work. Oh, you should have seen I built a house today. Wow.
No.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do.
Talk about when the brick fell on you from a great height.
Yeah.
That's comedy.
Exactly.
Horrible gigs.
Do any stick out, like what real?
Oh man, I remember at the Dapto Hotel. We turned up. The guy went, we thought about waiting till the rugby team turns up because they just won the grand final. I went, no, we don't need to wait for them, mate. We really don't. It's grand final you want all the footy players to shut up and listen to. Are you going to turn the TVs off? No, mate.
Oh.
You stand there. I've walked on stage, and this was in the early days where everything was, observational comedy. So you're desperately trying to be Seinfeld or whoever the hell you are, and you walk out and you go, so, have you ever noticed? And there's a bloke, there's 4 blokes in the front row looking at the telly, and I'm standing there, and they all looked at me like this, and one of them went, no, fuck off. And then you realise I'm there for another 20 minutes. Because if I don't do the 20 minutes, I don't get the $200 that I've driven an hour and a half for.
That's it. Stick your feet and deal with it.
Go. I've had horrible gig. Down 3 a.m. at some club in Balmain where they had one of those flashing disco lights, and there's 3 people in there. Like, why am I here,
mate? That's
which someone said to me the other day should be the name of my autobiography. Why am I here?
Why am I here?
So many gigs where you think you should have just hired a musician, mate, because you get comics. But we require silence. We require the audience to shut up and attention. We require attention.
Yeah.
Musicians can play over them. Side acts can like that. Playing doesn't matter if they're talking. We want stop talking to each other and enjoying each other's company and listen to this guy you don't know.
I've noticed some stuff, everyone.
Yeah.
Here it is.
And here it is for the next 40 minutes because the guy wants 40 minutes out of me.
I had a corporate, and they were very professional, which is all in a nice big professional place. The organizer couldn't have been nicer. I had a little green room. You see these dream corporates where you call on arrival and there's
special.
a green room. Not, because I do quite a few sporting things over the years, and often it'll be like, mate, turn up, have lunch with us, and it's. I like to try and be social. It's not my instinct to be social with people. I try to be social because I find
also kills the sense of theatre.
That's what I find is
no one
harder.
had Frank Sinatra didn't sit down with the people and have a meal before he got up and sang.
I don't mind.
Kills
like
that.
if I do that, I don't mind doing it after I've been on stage. I'll sit and chat and do whatever.
Yeah.
So this one was one of those dream ones where we've got a parking voucher for you. You can leave straight after. Like, beautiful. I'm literally on stage for 30 minutes. But there's this one table down the front that did not stop talking. And they're young.
Yeah.
And it's mostly very pretty young ladies.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't. And so then they're getting shush. I'm trying to just battle on. Because I'm like, in a sense, you're the interloper.
It's
and
their
they're not.
party.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, whatever. But then the people around them are shushing. And I'm like, I've got to address this because it's kind of thing. And I just said,
disruptive now.
I said, oh, sorry. And I sort of paused and looked, and then the tension, and I said, oh, sorry. I don't care what you do, but the people around you, it's obviously annoying people. And then one of the girls just gave me the big folded up huff. And I said, oh, it's all right. Like, I know you've missed, like, you coming in partway through, but we'll put it on TikTok later. You can catch it. Right? Dumb joke. Not really even a joke. I had nothing to say. Anyway, so it's just like that. And then, so they quiet for a bit, and then they start going again. And it's like, as I walk off, like, I sort of did my time and I walked off, and because the tables over this side are really good.
They want it to be there, yeah.
And there's a couple of guys down the front. One guy's almost looking at me like he's enjoying it, like, just keep going, mate. You're doing like
we're loving it.
Yeah,
we're loving
really
it.
encouraging. Yeah. And it's lovely. So it wasn't. They weren't an example of the night, but. So as I walk off, the organisers, thank you so much. That was great. Thanks so much. You're right to get your parking, all that sort of stuff. I walk past the table, and this is one of the girls is just going, boring. Just I'm like, wow. All right, thanks for having me. Anyway, go home. Get a little notification on Instagram. Someone sent you a video. I'm like, oh, this is. Click on it. The video is from this girl. One of the girls from the table has taken video of me and panned from me over to their table, and there's this guy sitting there, young guy, he'd be 19-ish, just going, miming, boring. I got heckled at home. I'm sitting on the lounge.
You know what cyberbullying is.
I know. I said, I'm a 41-year-old man. I was cyberbullied by a couple
teenage girls.
Yeah, it was
fantastic.
And it just, and like I've looked at the video, and Nat, my wife, is going, what's wrong? And it was emasculating to even have to say it. I'm like, oh my God, this is but yeah, I couldn't believe, like,
that's the world, man.
Mate, it wasn't until a couple of days later that I realised, you know what? He didn't even have the courage to heckle while I'm on stage. Like, don't worry about me.
He's doing
guys.
it remotely.
Oh, but it made me just think, like, because as comics, and as people who sort of missed that cyberbullying phase of our teenage years, I was like, oh man, I really, really feel for these kids. Imagine having people with that access to your life.
Yeah, and while you're sitting at home in your bedroom, and all the bullying you thought stopped at the school gates is following you home.
And I'm a full-grown man who's happy. I'm about to go on a little weekend away with my wife to celebrate our anniversary. So I'm in a great mood. I'm a beer in hand. I've just done a corporate, which I was paid nicely for.
But
that bothered me.
Takes the shine off.
And I was just like, so I've got realistically, apart from that, my night was great.
Yeah.
And then that still bothered me. I'm like, well, man, these kids.
That's what you're talking about now, mate.
Oh, yeah,
you know
exactly.
What I mean? It's still there.
Oh, 100%.
And I must confess, I did a gig the other day, and I can't remember what I was for, but at one point you sort of turn and someone's got their phone up on you.
Yeah.
And I sort of I watched it out of the corner of my eye, and eventually went down. I thought, okay, well. At what point do you turn around and go, "Hey, mate, this is This is not freely available on your YouTube for the rest of time."
Yeah.
And it bothers me a bit, because what we do is, I know that's a medium and that's a form of getting. But I'm not interested in that, mate. I'm enjoy it in the room, but it's copy. Surely it's a curious thing. Surely it's copyright to me, but you don't want to break the vibe of the room to go, mate. Can you not film?
But it's so common now too that even saying, "Can you not film?" People, it's not even. I feel like when I first started, at least anyone doing that was seen as poor form. Yeah. Like in the audience would go, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that." Yeah. But now it feels like it's just people would be curious as to why you wouldn't want it filmed. I get it all the time. I actually asked. I was doing some new stuff at a room. That actually films your set anyway. Yep. Standout comedy down. I don't know if you've been there. It's at the Chippo Hotel now, where Edge Comedy on Edge used to be, and it's really good. Reese is great. He runs a really nice room, and so I'm just down there trying some new stuff, working some stuff out from a festival show. And there's a girl in the front row filming it. I said, "Are you filming this?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I said,
"Just why?
Why?" Yeah. And she goes, "Oh, just why not?" I said, "Because it's probably not going to be very good. Yeah. Don't worry about just."
But it's also not yours to film.
But also, I think you go to a concert, a music concert, and everyone gets their phones out and they're filming. It's like, are you really going to sit back and watch and go, "Oh, that was what a night," or just be in the moment? I think that's the harder thing. Like, I don't get that's what appeals to me. Like I love the way you describe it. Is it's in the room.
It's in the room.
Stand-up's
yeah,
in
yeah.
the room.
It absolutely belongs to the people that. What I'm doing tonight is unique to this moment in time. You, the crowd, this, the room, and the way I do stand up, and I'm not, and everybody attaches it differently. I will do a different set, slightly different, sometimes greatly different, sometimes a little bit different in each room that I work in. It'll start differently. There won't be the same order. Some things will get left out. Other things will be brand new. So each room is a unique thing.
Yes.
So let's enjoy this unique, once-in-a-lifetime thing.
That's actually one of the observations I was going to bring up about the way you do stand-up is you... And one of the reasons when we work together, I like watching you work a room that I've just worked, is your approach to that audience is different to mine often, or you'll have seen what's going on, read the vibe in the room, and often your material, like on paper, it's not necessarily, it's from your list of, most of it's from your list of jokes that I've seen you do, but the way you approach them or deliver them or when they go in the set is different. And I'm like, I'm always curious when did that there? I wonder what that is. Or sometimes I can work, okay, yeah, he's seen that this crowd's into this, and you'll start with more.
Without pissing in your pocket too, following people who are doing it well shits me a bit because I've got to work harder. There's
nothing better than
you got to follow. There's two. You either follow someone who's lousy, in which case you're stitching together a room that's slowly falling apart.
Yeah.
Or the people that you're following have killed, and because you're closing the show, the expectation is you can kill more.
Yeah.
Which means you've got to step up, which is great because it forces you to. So you actually, your energy is different when you walk on stage because you think, shit, I'm walking onto laughter. So this is actually, I've got to work harder because that prick was funny too.
There's nothing better than that feeling of watching someone go, and you see a good quality night and everyone lifts a bit. And then, okay, I remember doing a run at the store. This is years ago now, and Al Del Benny and Steve Hughes were following each other, and we did the whole weekend, and I was hosting, and just watching them, like, I think they flipped around or something. There was it was just a bit of a deal, like, you do one night, I'll do the other night, and watching the way, like, Steve goes out the first night, and Al's just starts to
crack
the neck.
Joints,
he goes, I've
got to work on my toes tonight. I can't lean back on my heels.
Yeah, got to work tonight. And then the next night, watching Steve go, all right, I'm gonna have to really. And it was great to watch two guys that are at that level, just a bit of ego,
That's the closest comics get to. See, a performer's in a stage show, if you're working in an ensemble of players on a stage show and everyone's lifting their performance and you're working off someone in a scene, if you happen to be working in a production opposite Ian McKellen, then you're lifting your performance because you've got to match that performance. Comics are solo animals. The only time we can experience one performer lifting another performer's performance is the following. Because you're a solo unit. You're on stage. It's a very lonely profession in that regard. You're on stage all by yourself. You're not like musicians who the band can all look at each other and knowingly go, "Oh, no one's listening. Isn't this awkward?" We're all by ourselves. Very vulnerable.
And if it's not going well, there's no one else getting you out of it.
It's obvious who we're all looking at.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you can blame the audience all you want, but
it's not their fault. It's never their fault.
No.
Sometimes it can be close to their fault.
Well,
they don't help themselves, but at the end of the day, I must. As you get older, you realise when I started, you took it really personally that you couldn't win them over, that you couldn't get them to shut up, that all those things. And now, as you get older, you think, I haven't got the. If you really don't want to listen, and you're not going to shut up, then okay.
Yeah, there's not much
I can do.
And that's I think the thing too is accepting. All right, I'm not for everyone. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of do feel like, because you do get distracted by the person that's not enjoying themselves. It's
the only one I remember.
Yeah,
that's one bloke out of 1,000 sitting there like this is the one person I think about. And you're right. You can't please everybody.
And I think that's, for me, that's a thing I've just sort of starting to get my head around in terms of, okay, it's all right to write material that's not going to be for everybody if it's the stuff you want to do. Because then you sort of get to a point once you, I don't know, like you can, okay, I know what will work in certain rooms and I know the type of material, but do I want to keep writing that or do I want to evolve myself? And I mean, that sounds a bit wanky, but
but I think we all start that first way of trying to write jokes that make the room laugh. And as you get more confident and you hone your technique and your personality and your voice, you find your unique voice, you start writing to your voice, and then you've learned how to make the room laugh now, and then you find the material you want to do, and then you become that marriage of the room laughs for the material I want to do. Not anybody can drop their pants and get laughs. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that comic. I want to be this. I want to work this side of the street.
Yeah.
Which means, you walk into some rooms and you realise the room is enjoying this side of the street, and you realise they're not going to enjoy my side of the street.
Yeah, I've of all the gigs we've done, I've only seen you struggle once, which was I guarantee you remember this gig. It was like a fundraiser for someone was doing a bike ride or something for Cantu.
Yeah.
And it was a business. The whole business had come along. So it was an unofficial corporate sort of a thing.
Right.
And there was a visiting delegation of Chinese business people who were there as clients
that
or
was
whatever.
the one. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I remember that one.
And you had this whole thing on,
Yeah.
and it's the whole thing on China.
It's
and
topical.
it's unbelievably topical. But it's also not in any way judgmental or it's more you're making a lot of fun out of basically out of the news, which is something you're very, very good at.
Yeah.
But
I do remember
the
that.
tension, because obviously there was a lot riding on this delegation going well, and they brought them along to the comedy night, and the tension in that room was I was actually almost going to leave.
Did you?
That one, because I was like, I'd teed up I think I might have only just done a spot, or I might have been hosting or whatever, but I know I was planning on leaving because I had to get home. And then when you started,
I'm not going to leave. It's a car crash.
I'm not missing this.
Oh no, I do remember that. That was in the city. I do remember that. In fact, I've got a gig coming up tomorrow. Where just apropos of stuff that's going on in the news at the moment, I'm realising, all that material I wanted to do, probably can't do it now.
Oh.
Because it's an industry focused on a certain aspect, which is sort of, but you realise there are times as a comic, and this is it's ultimately it's their party, and you're not there to bring down their belief in their job that they do.
Yeah,
it's like going to do a job for the banks and yelling at them about how fucked the banks are. But hang on, this is our party.
Yeah,
And then at what point do you then betray yourself as an artist who speaks versus I'm here to just cash the check, thanks. And going back to that, I can make the room laugh. So you end up going, okay, I'll do that. I'll do my airline material because that's non-threatening, and
which I haven't seen you do in ages. You got a great airline bit.
Probably going to wheel it out tomorrow.
And I think that's to having the breadth of material at a certain point. If you're someone who writes only certain types of political or whatever, then you're sort of stuck in that. I remember
it limits you, but I guess and that's all that's the business of show. Is that it's a business, and we're paying you, corporate particularly, we're paying you to come along to our event, which is everybody's here, from the founder of the company to the middle managers to the young people. Please don't offend the managing director's wife by doing something blue, not that I work blue, but blue or inappropriate or overly sexual, overly religious, or overly, and you see them now. You see it on when you get gig sheets. Sometimes you say this function is to raise money for this. Please avoid any not that either of us are particular, these comics, but homophobic, transphobic, racist material, sexist material, religious material, and there'd be some comics going, "Oh shit, that's my act." Thankfully, it's not.
You know what I always think when I see those? It's like, oh, who'd they have last year?
yeah.
Because sometimes the list is really specific.
Yeah.
You're like, I wonder who that was.
Yeah, who was that walked out and did that?
So we are getting almost to time, but
really?
I will. I'm gonna hit you up to keep coming back because I enjoy
got nowhere
these
else
chats.
to be, mate. Now that I know where the place is, I can find it easier.
Yeah. But my question, I suppose, I wanted to ask tonight is what when you write something, what tickles your brain to write? What's the sort of stuff at the moment that's entertaining you, or the thoughts that are entertaining you, where you go, I'm going to make a bit about that? Because you think about lots of different things.
Yeah, it's look, I tend to I do if I'm driving around and I'll hear something on the radio, I tend to react to the radio a lot, and or I react to the news. So if it's in the news, and if it's in the news and it's maybe a subject that comics tend to shy away from, then I will try and tackle it. And sometimes I sit there at a room and I listen, and they'll get up and like, for instance, the Queen passed away, right? And I did a few gigs in that period, and not one comic mentioned it, and I think, how can you not mention it?
That was the zeitgeist for probably 5-6 days straight.
Yeah, but that was a bit, why, like, I remember, I'm not saying you go out there and you be offensive to the Queen. It's got to be a clever bit, but it's like, the way my brain works is I like to do stuff that's, if it's happened today, I want to try and do something about it tonight, because it probably won't last long, so,
no.
I'll do the joke and I won't ever get to do the joke again. I mean, I did, that's happened a few times. I guess I like to react to whatever's current in the news at the moment, and that's the way I've always been. I've never been someone I've not been a comic that's done that sort of my life stuff.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the grand picture, and that's where I get my material from. So anything that's in the news at the moment, it's the list.
It's a beautiful structure.
China's at the top of the list at the moment. Terrorism was on the top for a while, and the Olympics was around a few years ago, and then we've got the Optus breach. I'll probably think about that for the next few days. And
I will. I got the email this morning.
Did you?
Oh,
there you go. See, and then I'll think about it from that, and there's the jokes about Optus, but then I like to think, well, okay, it's a stepping stone to talking about the notion of identity and the notion of trust and the notion of how much of our lives are we prepared to hand over, and the notion of online honesty. So Optus is just a springboard to
an issue
to concepts and issues in and around whatever that's triggering. The future of banks, the future of trust, the future of our kids, and all of a sudden it's a really broad. It's opened up in a massive, broad thing, which as a comic, you get out there and you go, I can feast on this for days, for months. And at the end of the month, I'll have a big chunk of material, which is not specific to Optus, but was triggered by Optus, the Optus situation, that'll end up being a bit about identity theft or identity. I mean, I have bits that float around, but maybe it's time to coalesce all these things into one big long thing that was triggered by Optus, but in 5 years' time, it'll guarantee it'll still be as relevant. You won't use Optus because no one's going to, or you just wait till it happens to Westpac and it keeps coming back.
Yeah, this won't be the last data breach, I guarantee
that's right.
it.
So, and that's for me. That's what I get joy out of.
That's that's a fascinating insight into the way, because I don't know if you saw there was a lot of stuff falling into place in my brain then,
right.
Having watched how you work and how you sort of write and develop material.
Right.
Is that I think is what I enjoy about your work particularly, is when you tackle, like, because you do use news stories to jump off, but it's never just about that news story.
Yeah,
like it's usually you find it in a way that, like, or you give it context that I hadn't thought of or whatever, which is a great. I've been trying to write a little more like that, just because it's a far more I think rewarding way to write, but it's also I find that
gives a good joke longevity too. If you can remove it from its original source and it becomes a standalone thought about a general concept that society is facing that happens to be highlighted by the Optus breach. But what that's highlighting is that notion of trust and security and identity and who we are and how do you replace a passport, and do you fuck the passport? I'll just still take someone else's passport. All of a sudden you start. So it started there, but it ends here.
Yeah,
And wonderful.
it becomes that beautiful magic trick of the next data breach that comes around. No one remembers the Optus one, and all of a sudden Pete's got. How did he get 12 minutes on that?
12 minutes. Unbelievable.
That's fascinating. So I will get you back for another episode because we got to talk radio, television. You've had a story, and I do want to talk about your art.
Oh yeah, you got that as well. Oh yeah, buddy.
You're a very talented painter. You've been subject of an Archibald Prize.
I've been subject of 3 Archibald Prizes. 1 painted by someone else and 2 painted by me.
You've got a very paintable head.
A lot of light gets reflected off it.
I've never heard anyone describe it as, oh mate, he's got a head for canvas.
Canvas, absolutely. He's got an head for abstract art.
Yes. So yeah, well, I don't want to talk about that as well because
Cool,
absolutely fascinating, and that is one of the things too.
Have something in my teeth. I've had something on my teeth.
Nah,
I picked it out.
It's in 4K. We'll get it in the edit. Don't worry about
charming.
it. Yeah, that's one of the things I've like. People say I don't know art, but I know what I like. I don't even particularly know what I like, so I'm keen to be educated in the art world as well. So we will get you back. Before we go though, plug all your socials and where can people find you in this online and that's. Remember your advertising years, Pete.
On the back of the Optus data breach, nowhere. I have no presence anymore. I'm deleting it all. I don't trust any of it. I'm on Instagram. That's really the only one that I'm on the others, but I don't really.
Your Instagram handle, Bernerland?
Bernerland.
Yes.
You can follow that. And Twitter. I'm on Twitter, but I use that as a filing cabinet for ideas more than anything else. And if you happen to see one, great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And you on Twitter, you are...
Peter_Berner, I think. I was Peter Berner, but in the early but I was drunk and forgot the password and I'm not sure. I think I have another one.
You might get an email from Optus with the password.
Yeah,
that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much for doing it, Pete.
Pleasure.
Well,
pleasure.